This is Tommy from Farflung, and you're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latin America.
Hey, this is Chris from Acid Mammoth, and you're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latinoamerica.
Bienvenidos a Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Mi nombre es Román Tamayo y continuamos con esta serie de especiales visitando a nuestras bandas favoritas alrededor del mundo. El día de hoy nos toca justamente platicar con unas leyendas del space rock. Ellos son Farflung, están celebrando 30 años de carrera, así que tenemos a toda la banda con nosotros, a Tommy, a Michael, a Paul y a Chris. Y bueno, vamos a hablar de su nuevo álbum que salió con Zulatron Records, también de los inicios de la banda, cómo era la escena de Los Ángeles, la escena del stoner rock, del space rock, y bueno, también su opinión sobre lo que significa ser... por decirlo de alguna forma exitoso, si lo quieren ver de esa manera, famoso, cuál es su percepción de esto. Y pues bueno, vamos a arrancar. En esta primera parte pues les preguntamos cómo se conocieron, cómo inició la banda. Y pues bueno, Michael dice que estaba en un bar y que escuchó a alguien que gritaba Space Rock. Y que ese era Tommy, así que pues bueno, se hicieron muy buenos amigos. Rápidamente se dieron cuenta que ambos amaban a Hawkwind, a Nick Turner, también tenían gustos similares en el crowd rock, así que decidieron unir fuerzas, crear un proyecto que evocara ese tipo de sonidos de los 70s, de Alemania, de Inglaterra. Y pues bueno, así fue como inició la banda. No tenía mayor pretensión, solamente querían tocar. Y pues bueno, obviamente iban en contracorriente porque nada de eso estaba de moda y a nadie le importaba ese tipo de sonidos. Pero helos aquí, 30 años después, todas unas leyendas y unas instituciones. Vámonos con esto, ya regresamos aquí a Doom and Stone. Ya se la sabe, gócela.
Well,
it's the original drummer, and I had a band. We were students at Cal Arts, and we were playing a show in Los Angeles. And while we were playing, there was this guy in the front row that kept on, and he had this huge, big, long, orange, red hair, and he kept on yelling, "Space rock, space rock, space rock." We're like, who is this guy? And it turned out it was Tommy. We met up after the show, and then we ended up joining forces and starting Farflung. I don't know. I mean, how do you remember it, Tommy?
I was in this band, Pressurehead, and I was doing stuff with Nick Turner and Helios Creed at the time. And just by chance, I wanted to go and get a drink, and there was this place called the Anti-Club, which is kind of not that great, but like you could walk in there and get a cheap drink. And I just heard this cosmic rock coming from the other room, and I was like, what the fuck? It's like I thought like we were the only guys doing space rock in LA, but it was different. It definitely had a crowdy feel to it. I was just really taken back by it. And I went in, it was Michael and Brandon's band playing, and I just really liked it. At that time, Pressurehead was kind of like, I was just starting to get a little, we were trying to do this industrial, heavy, almost like suicide-y kind of simple version of like industrial version of Hawkwind in a way. But I've always been a huge krautrock rock fan, but I also really like Cabaret Voltaire and This Heat and all that stuff. And there was elements of that in Michael's music and Michael and Helianthus' music. So I just felt at that time I wanted to know who they were. And we all had some drinks together, and I just invited them. Pressurehead was playing a show at somewhere, and I invited them to come down.
This is the Roxy, I think.
The Roxy, and then
we went. Brandon went there.
Yeah, when we all got together, we just kind of figured out that this would be a good band. Our ideas were very, very similar about what sort of music we liked and what we wanted to do artistically, not as a band, but like being creative. And I think they were having problems with their front guy at the time too. And we just decided to join forces, and that's how that started, really. Me being a voyeur on their sex show.
when the gods all fear and dread. You're gonna show me a burning universe. You're gonna etch it into my brain. You're gonna give me the power of ESP, and I'll never speak again. I was sitting in the crystal room, playing with my head, sympathizing with pain. It's making me a lots of bread. Show me the path of consciousness, speaking with the tides, dancing with the truth of wires, as the cycle requires. The sky's not so dead.
Estamos de regreso en este especial enfocado a Farflung, esta entrevista que les hicimos a la banda completa, Tommy, Michael, Paul y Chris. Y pues bueno, estuvo bastante legal cómo se conocieron. La siguiente pregunta que les hicimos sin duda fue acerca de su primer álbum, 25,000 pies por segundo, podría ser 25,000 feet per second. Y pues también les preguntamos un poco cómo era la escena de aquellos años, cómo eran sus primeros shows. Y bueno, sin duda dicen que bueno, referente al álbum, cuando lo grabaron fueron con un productor en un estudio pequeño que grababa bandas muy raras, alternativas, y sé que se empezó a hacer famoso porque ahí grabó Weezer, grabó Beck, y bueno, este estudio empezó a tener más y más hype, pero en ese tiempo grababan a puras bandas bizarras, alternativas, así se les decía, así pues que se rifaron a grabar todo en cinta, en tape, no había nada digital como en nuestros días. Y pues bueno, también Tommy nos pone en contexto, ¿no? Él es de Inglaterra, de Irlanda para ser específico. Dice que cuando llegó en los 80s a Los Ángeles, pues él venía de una escuela donde se escuchaba post-punk, psicodelia, era muy normal que la gente conociera estos sonidos. Pero pues bueno, llegando a Los Ángeles en los 80, le sacó de onda que nadie conociera bandas como Can. Entonces pues fue como, ¿qué diablos está pasando aquí? ¿En dónde estoy? Esto es un mundo muy diferente. Y pues bueno, en esos años, obviamente en los 80s, 90s, el hair metal, el glam metal estaba al máximo. Entonces pues justamente lo más raro que había era como estas bandas de avant-garde jazz, era como la alternativa, si lo quieren ver de esa forma, a esa escena metalera, que bueno, en San Francisco también se estaba gestando ahí el thrash metal, pero al final era metal, no era psicodelia, no era rock macizo, conciso, eran otras ondas. Y bueno, referente a esto, pues Michael cuenta una anécdota muy curiosa. Un día estaba en el whisky a go-go y pues él dice que tiene su cabello largo en esos años y que la gente le decía que se parecía a Johnny Thunders, ya saben, de los New York Dolls. Entonces pues un día llegó un vato así y le dice: oye, carnal, ¿tú eres músico? Sí, yo toco la guitarra. Pues te pareces al Johnny Thunders, ¿no quieres hacer una banda conmigo así como Poison? Y pues nada más se rió, obviamente, le dio el avión, le dijo, chido, pero pues no es lo mío. Entonces pues lo suyo siempre fue la psicodelia. Y bueno, justamente ellos tocaban sus primeros shows en galerías de arte o shows de arte, también en shows de beneficencia. No había muchos lugares que les abrieran las puertas porque era un sonido bizarro, raro, a nadie le importaba realmente. Esto todo era hair metal, glam metal, chicas, girls, ya saben, onda Motley Crue. Pero pues bueno, en estos viajes que hacían luego a San Francisco, ahí conocieron a Paul. Y bueno, Paul dice que sin duda se quedó en shock cuando los vio, que no entendía por qué traían los teclados, no entendía el sonido, pero al final le gustó. Y véanlo, muchos años después, bueno, ahora forma parte de Farflung. Así que pues bueno, justamente estos shows raros enfocados al crowd rock, al psych y al space es lo que creó a Farflung, y esos fueron los inicios de la banda. Vamos a escuchar esta información de boca de la banda. Ya regresamos a este especial aquí a Doom and Stone.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy el Chino Burga desde Lima, Perú, y están escuchando Doom and Stone Latinoamérica.
Hey guys, I want to ask you about your first release, 25,000 feet per second. I know this was your first album, so can you tell us a little bit how was the recording process? And if you remember, how was your first shows? How was the local scene in Los Angeles, San Francisco in those days? I mean, talking about the 80s, the beginning of the 90s. So tell us about this, please.
25,000 was released on a label called Flipside.
Yeah.
And you know, we recorded that with Tom Grimley. And in Los Angeles at that time, there was kind of like, there was like a West Side scene and an East Side scene. And we were part of the East Side scene. And there were like kind of three little meccas of alternative music around colleges. There was Cal Arts, there was Art Center, and then there was Loyola Marymount. And those scenes kind of mixed in the alternative East Side scene in Los Angeles. And one of those guys from Loyola Marymount was called Tom Grimley. And he had a studio called Poop Alley. So most of the kind of arty, weird East Side bands recorded with him. The most famous people that started recording with him were people like Beck and Weezer. Those are the guys that got famous. Kid Congo with Congo Novell recorded some stuff there. A lot of different people. But anyways, we went in and recorded our first record with Tom, and it was totally different than now. I mean, it was on tape. It was a weekend. You know, we went in, recorded it, mixed it, and then that was it. I mean, what do you remember from that, Tommy?
It was a very strange period of music because, you know, I came from the UK. I'm from Northern Ireland, but I spent a lot of my time in London and rural England, and obviously I grew up weaned on what John Peel was playing on the radio, so I was like in this hard place between post-punk and psychedelic rock music, but mostly Hawkwind and, like, you know, anarchic punk stuff. Like, I really loved Rudimentary Peni and Cross and stuff like that, but the very political edge of punk. And, you know, I lived that sort of lifestyle until, you know, I met someone who moved to America. And but I had that, I always, like, I couldn't believe nobody knew who Can and Hawkwind and Noy was when I moved to LA in the mid 80s. And I was like, fuck, I want to start a band, or at least I want to try to go this direction because it's such a great form of music. But that was considered like an outsider sort of approach. In what Michael was saying about that scene, the scene he's talking about, there was no genre, it wasn't genre specific. It was just people who had like a vision doing their, no two bands sounded the same. Like, we would be playing bands with someone hopping up and down in a trampoline screaming, or there might be some sort of avant-garde jazz guitarist playing, but we didn't care. It was all, but it was a psych element to it, but it was just a very artistic sort of genre. And I sort of fell in with that through the people I knew. And it just seemed like the good form, because other than that, in LA, it was the hair band scene going on at the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Coconut Teaser, and I didn't want any fucking part of that. I mean, me and Michael, we both kind of like Hannah Rocks a bit back in the day, and Dogs D'Amour, but that's as far as we got into hair rock. Maybe, you know, was it Nikki Sud and stuff like that? But
I remember when I first came down to go to school in LA, and my hair was long and dyed black, and I had a kind of looked like Johnny Thunders. And the Whiskey A Go-Go was this like, total rock scene. And went out one night, I was like, what the fuck? I have nothing to do, I'll go to the Whiskey A Go-Go. And so I went, and it was like a rock and roll night. And you know, I mean, that's the way I look. I mean, Tommy remembers I used to have velvet jackets and long black hair and scarves and like the whole kind of like Keith Richards thing. And what I didn't realize is like guys went to the Whiskey A Go-Go band, hair guys, metal guys, and they tried to find other musicians to start bands with. So I walk in, go to the bar, get a drink, and this guy comes up and starts to talk to me, and he goes like, hey man. And he's this total like metal hair guy, like he looked like he was in Poison or some shit, you know. And so he comes up to me, and goes like, hey man, are you a musician? And I was like, yeah, I play guitar. And he goes like, yeah, like we just moved out here, man. We're putting this band together, but my drummer saw you walk in, and he goes, check that guy out. He looks just like Thunders right before he died. I was like, jeez, thanks, man. Like Thunders right before he died.
So fair enough to all that stuff, you know, that was going on, stuff like that. But like, you know, I had long hair too and stuff. You know, it was like, you know, the whole Grebo thing that was going on. But, you know, it's like, you know, we were musically Farflung wasn't doing anything like that. So we gravitated to playing art shows, lofts, and the kind of only scenes that were like sort of like free sort of scenes, like benefit shows and art openings, and playing in like the sewage works, like down in you know, downtown LA, and somebody just set up a generator. So there it was sort of like getting close, regardless of what the artistic part of it was. It was like, you know, getting close to like the roots of, like, say, bands like Hawkwind or Amon Duel did back in the day whenever they were starting. It was an open field for us. I mean, I'm really glad that happened, because it really molded us into a band that had our own identity. And a lot of the people that we know now went on to different walks of life, different things, but very, very eclectic world. And it was the same for Paul in the band.
That's how I met you guys, was playing like weird eclectic shows in San Francisco and LA, because I was living in San Francisco. And so we would do shows together, and that's how I first met you. And I like, at first I saw you guys and I was like, I didn't understand about Hawkwind and stuff then. And I was just like, I was such a latecomer to it all. And then I saw you again and I was just like, oh shit, this was amazing. Because it was, you know, fusing like keyboards with just this kind of driving krautrock beat stuff, and just so psychedelic. And no one else was really doing space rock like that. I mean, I can't even really think, maybe a couple of people in San Francisco.
I really don't think there was a
Helios
space rock or psych scene going on at all, from what I remember, other than like Savage Republic, who were deemed to be an industrial band, and what was going on. And like, I was very into what was happening in the East Coast up here. Like, there was a band called Alien Planetscapes. There was the fantastic Mars Everywhere. You know, there was FI. There was these bands, but it was all a very underground thing. And the reason we all connected, that was like the kind of the roots, I think, of a lot of the heavy psych scene, was because of the Hawkwind networks. Like, I knew Nick Turner and Helios Creed and people like that, and Dell, and I knew a lot of the Hawkwind guys. So there was a network going on where you were made aware of all these other little bands that were happening. Not much ever came of it, but it was the kind of roots, I think, of psych rock, you know, like playing extended jam music. And though, you know, I think every city, their take on space rock was completely different. Ours certainly was. You know, we definitely were coming from a post-punky place, mostly like post-punk, you know. Everyone would have their different opinion in the band, but like, for me, it was that's what it was, like a cross-pollination of all genres of music we liked, without really, not necessarily, like, we never actually thought about, like, oh, we got to get a record together. We didn't really care. We were just having fun being a band, and that still goes on to this day. Like, when we record an album, it's like there's still that spirit of, let's just make music. You know, that we don't have to fall into a pigeonhole or do something. Like, after Wind in Eternity, I think everyone expected us to be, because it's such a heavy record, but it was just another, we wanted to do that at that time. But, you know, there is a psych element to the music, but it doesn't, I don't think Farflung has to repeat itself over and over again.
Estamos de regreso en este Doom and Stone con los Farflung celebrando 30 años de viajes espaciales. Y pues bueno, la parte que sigue de nuestra entrevista es una de las más interesantes sin duda, porque nos hablan un poco de la escena de los 90s, el desert rock. A ellos les tocó sin duda de ver nacer toda esta escena. Ellos ya tenían su banda, pero en el desierto estaba pasando algo muy peculiar. Bandas como Across the River, Caius, Airlings fueron como las bandas con las que tuvieron más contacto ellos sin duda. Entonces pues bueno, estaban como pues en ese tiempo no tan sorprendidos porque solo eran un grupo de adolescentes, de morros, pero pues bueno, sabían que había algo especial ahí y pues bueno, tocaban con ellos aunque sentían que la escena era muy individualista, no había sensación de colectividad, de amistad, de camaradería como quizás pasa en otros lados. Pero pues bueno, están muy sorprendidos de que esta escena se hizo muy grande con los años. Y bueno, dice Tommy que quizás una de las cosas que más le impactó fue cuando el Ratborn los invitó a tocar a este festival y les pidió que grabaran un disco en vivo. Entonces fue cuando él se dio cuenta que algo estaba pasando, que esa escena que nació en California había crecido y pues bueno, se había vuelto bastante popular. Y pues bueno, cuentan algunas anécdotas muy peculiares, sobre todo de Sleep. Ellos dicen que pues conocieron a Sleep siendo unos niños, unos adolescentes súper flaquitos con pantalones acampanados, que amaban Black Sabbath obviamente. Y pues bueno, ellos fueron a ver a Nick Turner de Hawkwind alguna vez y a Sleep abrió, entonces fueron como, chale, ¿y estos morros qué onda? ¿Por qué están aquí? O qué onda. Y pues bueno, lo dejaron pasar. Luego dice Paul que en el 94 le encantaba Neurosis y fue a un show de ellos. Y pues bueno, justamente se encontró que los abridores eran Sleep. Y bueno, dijo como, chale, estos morros otra vez aquí. Entonces dice que un día iba en San José, justamente buscando un gabinete de guitarra. Y pues bueno, vi a Matt Pike por ahí caminando y pues vio que vivía lo de Black Sabbath al máximo y dijo, no, estos vatos sí son reales, no es una copia, no es una banda falsa. Y pues bueno, jamás se imaginaron que pues bueno, esta banda se iba a convertir en una de las más grandes de todos los tiempos, que iban a revolucionar y a cambiar un género. Entonces pues bueno, están muy sorprendidos. Dice también que pues obviamente perdieron de cierta forma el bote. Digo, bandas como los Black Angels, Sleep, Caius fueron bandas que sí la hicieron muy grandes, pero pues al final de cuentas dice que todo llega en su momento, ¿no? La escena psicodélica volvió a crecer, se hizo grande y bueno, a partir de hace unos 10, 15 años atrás es cuando más fuerza ha cobrado y bueno, tenemos varias bandas, colectivos, disqueras, ellos se sienten muy felices de ser parte de esto, aunque pues bueno, ha sido una carrera de resistencia, como ustedes podrán imaginar. Se han estado 30 años en el negocio y no siempre los 30 años fueron los mejores. Ahora por fin están gozando del reconocimiento y pues bueno, del cariño del público. Así que pues bueno, esperemos que esta escena continúe. Y bueno, vamos a seguir con este especial. Les dejamos las palabras de los Farflung aquí en Doom and Stone. Ya regresamos en este especial.
Wir sind Rotor und ihr hört Doomed and Stoned Latin America.
Well guys, I have another question for you. We have this new scene, I mean psychedelic stoner scene around the world. We have amazing bands like Causa Sui, Papir, Mythic Sonship. I mean in Germany, living legends like Color Haze, even Rotor, Electric Moon. In California, for example, the guys of Airless. In the US, we have this new neo psychedelic scene. I mean, the Black Angels, for example, Kikagaku Moyo. So, what do you think about this new scene? And can you share with us how you live the beginning of the stoner scene in California, the desert rock scene? I can imagine you play with some of these bands like Caius, maybe Across the River, Bram Bjork, Fu Manchu, maybe. So can you share with us how you live this scene and what do you think about this new worldwide psychedelic scene? I can imagine in 30 years you live a lot of changes. So please tell us about this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when the desert scene started, when there was Across the River, which was, tied in with, Caius and all that stuff. And, I remember the beginnings of the scene because, Farflung would play shows with those bands when they would come into LA and stuff, and we would have some sort of connection with that, but there was still an individuality about it. Even you get like Dave Catching and Pete Stahl, they were doing Earthlings, which was almost electronic music, but I loved that at the time, you know. But to me, it's insane, like talking about Gabby and people like that, how that little scene ended up going all the way over to Italy and places like that, became so big. Like I think the desert rock thing became bigger in Europe than it ever was out in the desert, because by the time that had blossomed, I think those bands like Queens of the Stone Age had become this major player in rock and roll in the world, and they're constantly changing too. But yes, I'm thoroughly amazed. Like, you know, I think when we did Wound in Eternity, we were actually rather shocked whenever Roadburn said, "Oh, we really love your album. You got to come and play and stuff." And we were kind of like, I mean, we were rather shocked by it. Like, oh, you mean they heard us all the way out there? And, you know, so yeah, that's when I realized it was when going to Roadburn for the first time with Farflung, when we played there and we recorded a live record there too. We were shocked. We said, this has become huge, man. This is really big, you know, and it's not all just bands trying to sound like Black Sabbath, which I was worried it was going to become. But Roadburn, and listening to what Walter did, the way it just went into all different directions. I mean, one of the first big tours I ever did was with the Nick Turner's version of Hawkwind with Del Detmar and Alan Powell. I was playing guitar, but the opening band was Sleep, and they were just a bunch of kids from what was it that Paul Santa Cruz?
They're from, I think, Cupertino or somewhere. Because I remember seeing them. I remember seeing Sleep. I remember this because it was New Year's Day at the Kennel Club in San Francisco, 1994, and Neurosis was headlining, and I loved Neurosis at the time, and I was like super stoked. But the funny thing is the middle band was Distorted Pony, and I love Distorted Pony from LA, and I was like, oh, cool, I get to see Distorted Pony. And then some band called Sleep was opening, and I was just like, whatever, I don't know who this is, you know. So I went, and Sleep's on stage playing, and like Tommy said, they're just a bunch of kids, and they're like all super skinny and like wearing like brand new looking like bell bottoms, like flares. Like no one wore bell bottom pants. Like I don't know where they found them in the 90s. And I remember watching it. I was like, whoa, they're like a Sabbath tribute band or something. Because I just didn't. They were pretty new. And then a couple weeks later, I was driving around San Jose. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time or something. I was driving around San Jose, like looking for a guitar cabinet. And I was driving my girlfriend to drop her off somewhere, and I saw this dude walking along the sidewalk in like Cupertino, and he was doing the Keep on Trucking walk, and it was Matt Pike. And I called my friend. I remember I found a payphone, and I called my friend. I was like, dude, that Sabbath like band, they're real, man. It's not like a stage get up, like they live that vibe. And then I remember reading an article in like Maximum Rock and Roll or something about them, and then I got super into it. The point being, it's amazing that they're huge. Like if you would have told me Sleep or St. Vitus would still be playing when I was buying St. Vitus records in high school, I would have said, that's impossible. Like, what do you mean? Here we are, and St. Vitus is probably bigger than they've ever been. Sleep still tours all the time.
That was the thing, was like, you know, we got the Sleep demo at Leafy Green that was booking the Nick Turner Hawkwind the tour show we were doing, and I remember they had the demo tape, and like everyone was kind of unsure like what Bob was gonna, and I remember them playing it, and Nick was just like, this is really fucking good, like, and we were like, this band's great, like, you know. And that was it, you know. It was like they did that tour, that first big tour I think that they did, like opening up for the Hawkwind thing we were doing, and they were just so amazing. I remember every night we would just sit and watch them, just playing the videos of space with the you know,
rockets launching in slow motion.
Yeah, and that to me, I was like, what's going on? There's something happening now, like, you know, and just seeing like how stunned the audience were. So like, I think Sleep, yeah, on that tour was the first time I saw what Romano's talking about, is that genre really starting to take off. And then of course, Wooden Ships and all those bands started showing up, and Light Bright Highway, they were one of the first bands. They were really great. And just all that, you know, what are they called? Death Angels, Dead Angels. Who am I thinking?
Black Angels?
Black
The Black
Angels.
Angels.
Yeah, Black Angel.
Awesome. Really awesome. And it happened so quick. And I just remember thinking, oh, we really lost that boat, because all these bands were just so fucking great. But what the good thing about it was the individualism of it, and that the psych scene that happened had really started having its own identity. And that's whenever we felt that we should fit into that scene a little bit better, because it seemed to be presenting more exciting music rather than everything sounding the same, which unfortunately it started to a little bit, maybe about 10 years ago. It started like there was just too many clones of the same band, but I think it's getting better again, I hope. Is it?
So bright, we shine so bright, we're shining 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 so bright, we shine so bright. We're shining so bright.
Qué temazo, eso fue We Are E de Farflung. Continuamos en este especial. La verdad es que estoy muy feliz, me siento muy agradecido de haber tenido la oportunidad de entrevistar a esta maravillosa banda. 30 años de carrera, y ustedes imagínense, en un género como el space rock. La verdad es que es una carrera de aguante, de mucho amor. Y justamente este año acaban de lanzar un nuevo disco. Like Drums in Honey es el nombre de este maravilloso álbum. Y le preguntamos a la banda cómo fue el proceso de grabación. Y sobre todo lo pregunto porque les tocó en el tiempo COVID. ¿Cómo fue crear un álbum en tiempo COVID? Y bueno, lo que nos cuentan, sobre todo Tommy y bueno, también Paul, es que estaban en lugares muy diferentes. Michael estaba en Italia, Paul acaba de llegar de Hong Kong, Tommy está en Nueva York. Entonces pues prácticamente era muy difícil coincidir para poder hacer un álbum. Entonces Chris fue quien empezó justamente a armar como por pedazos baterías, algunos sonidos que tenía por ahí con ayuda del Pro Tools en un estudio viejo. Y pues bueno, las ideas empezaron a fluir, se empezaron a mandar demos de aquí para allá, y de la nada pues bueno, este pedazo, esta pedacería que tenían de riffs, de notas, de baterías, pues bueno, empezaron a cobrar vida. Y así fue como nació su nuevo disco Like Drums in Honey, que ha sido lanzado por Zulatron Records, la disquera de Dave Schmidt, mejor conocido como Zula Basana, que bueno, pues ya lo tuvimos también aquí en entrevista. Y pues bueno, una de las cosas que más amaron de este disco es la libertad creativa. No hubo ninguna presión, no hubo nada de tenemos que superar algo, simplemente fue déjenlo fluir. Son unos tiempos donde no sabemos si vamos a seguir vivos, así que hagamos esto por diversión. Y así justamente nació este maravilloso álbum, que justamente lo que evoca es a la amistad, a la camaradería, a celebrar la trayectoria, 30 años en el camino, buenas anécdotas, malas, de todo les ha pasado, pero este álbum condensa ese trabajo de 30 años, esa carrera bastante larga. Escuchemos las palabras de Farflung aquí en Doom and Stone.
Hi, I'm Dave from Zulatron Records, Electric Moon, Zone 6, Intercosmos and Krautzone. And you are listening to Doomed and Stoned Latinoamerica. Have a good time.
Well guys, you have a new album Like Drums and Honey released by Zulatron Records. So I'm curious how you guys record this album. How was the creative process? Because I can imagine during the pandemic was a challenge. So can you share with us these stories? What's the beginning of this record and the behind, of course?
We were actually there was a mail between me and Chris last night where we were talking about how that record actually started. And you know, it's me and Chris were at the same position where we were just, our life was changing. We were living in LA, and we lived in LA our whole life, but we decided to leave. I mean, me and my wife almost did leave for the desert because we have so many friends out there, and you know, we've always loved it out there. But Chris was just, he decided to make that right. We even looked at places, but we went the completely opposite way. We went to New York and Woodstock. This is where I am right now, is in Woodstock, New York, or Willow, just outside of Woodstock. But we started recording at the place I had when Chris was breaking down his old studio. You know what? I'm going to let Chris talk about this because his version of the timeline's better. But the record started among this whole breakdown of things that was going on.
There was a lot of change.
There was a lot of
change going on. I just moved back to Los Angeles from Hong Kong. And so I had that going on, and there was just a lot of shakeup in my life as well. And then you guys were both getting ready to pull the ripcord. And I was listening to the record the other night, and I was kind of piecing it all together. And but Chris, you pipe in, you tell us about the process, because
I don't know. I just I just turned the microphone on, and then Tommy goes boing boing, and Michael goes zing zing. Paul goes toot toot, and I go bash bash.
It's total freedom rock. I mean, it's genreless. It's very liberating. Anything goes.
That's what's most interesting is the freedom. We could just do whatever comes. Whatever we're feeling, and I think that's a great thing.
The very fact that we were like leaving and there was virtually nothing left in the studio. Like Chris literally found pieces of drum kit that were lying around. It was an empty studio pretty much so, and Chris was doing these jams down in that area, so he had a mobile Pro Tools unit. So he brought it by to the studio because we'd already moved half of the stuff up to New York, but my wife was on tour at that time with her band, and she was away, and we said, well, we got this space we can use to lay down some tracks. But in a weird way, we kind of felt really comfortable the fact that there was broken keyboards, guitars that didn't work properly, amps that were kind of falling apart, that were creating this strange sound and stuff. We said, and you can hear it in the record. It's not only the breakdown of our lives and moving away from LA, which basically was just becoming this very oppressive, collapsing place for a lot of us in a lot of ways, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And so it was like kind of almost like Mad Max stuff, It was like the studio which had these fragments in it, and then Michael living in Italy and doing stuff remotely. COVID hadn't come yet, but you could feel the onset of something was going to happen. And that's why it's kind of a little bit of an ominous record in certain ways, because we'd just done this record, this capsule before it, which had that vibe in it. So in a way, it was kind of a continuation of that record where things were leading, especially for me lyrically. And we just started to, we decided to put this record together with fragments of what we had, but it came out so great. And then we had our friends dropping by and doing stuff, and that Michael dropping in via computer and stuff like that. And I just remember it was very ethereal. Like we didn't have any plan whatsoever for that record. It was literally jam, seeing how things worked in a deconstructed manner and not thinking about it having to be anything. We didn't have we had a label at the time, but as a matter of fact, it was meant to be a follow-up record. But we just didn't care. We said, let's just make some music. And then we had like a rough of it, and Chris then moved to the desert. And by the time we had all gotten kind of situated where we were, I ended up going to the desert, and me and Paul and Michael remotely, we just went to the desert, and Chris had got his new Saturn Moon studio, because he had Saturn Moon in LA, which was where we recorded a lot of the heavy psych sound stuff when he had that space. But Chris's introduction to the band, that's a whole different story. But we just decided that we worked. There was a time during the recording of that album we realized, as far as I'm concerned, this is it. This is the band. You come to a time in your life, and it's not about music; it's about friendship, and it's about camaraderie.
3 tickets to Cedars Sinai. Can we start here?
G'day guys, it's Adam from Psychedelic Salad Records in Tasmania, and you're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latino America.
As I was saying, that the record was kind of like a final gelling of the camaraderie between us. I mean, we've been through a lot as a band, and you know, it's never been easy being in our position. We've never been a big band, so we still have to kind of perform the fucking hazing gauntlet that every band that goes out to Europe to play, sleeping in cold places, like sleeping in the van, doing this thing. But like, you know, there's a certain element. There was one time I think me and Michael were just so fucking depressed and cold, and we were playing some shitty dockyard somewhere and nobody showed up or something. And we were literally like, you know, we said, why are we doing this stuff? You know, and every band gets to that point, but to be at our age, you know, and say, why are we doing this? Is kind of like it was a little depressing, but there's always a golden edge on it. For all the bad that happens, there's always a golden edge where maybe 2 days later you play somewhere and then all of a sudden it's just like this great show. And my big thing about rock and roll, I just want to say this, even though we should be talking about the new album, is it's not a fucking soccer game. You know, no one's a winner. Nobody has to be better than the other thing. And we've never been interested in that. The sort of like, you know, like our band has more people at your shows than this, or like, you know, there's more people that are into us and we've got more Facebook followers or whatever. You know, Farflung is testament to that. You could call it failure in some fields if you want. But like to us, this is a group of guys just doing, you know, really, really from the soul what we want to do. And we really don't care. We never have cared about being a band per se. We just always artistically feel. I make records myself because I want to hear them, because I want to listen to my records when I'm smoking a joint or I take some mushrooms, which there's plenty of out there, by the way, in the middle of the forest, and they're super primo. But like, that's why I make records, is because I want to listen to my own music, because I enjoy listening to my own music. I'm very proud of my own music, but that's why I do this.
I mean, when we were first started playing the club scene, the East Side club scene, and things were kind of happening in LA, we got, there was a music trade magazine. And I remember because it had Tony Bennett on the cover. I can't remember the name of the magazine, but anyways, it was a trade magazine. And we got like we got mentioned as one of the top unsigned bands in Los Angeles. And after that, we got a lot of interest from major labels wanting packages, and then people used to come see us. Like remember, like Rick Rubin always used to come see us, and then we sent packages to labels, and then they were all rejected because we weren't a band that had any kind. We weren't going to be Weezer or Peck or some shit like that. We didn't make pop. We weren't, I don't know, MTV friendly, or our songs were too weird, or they weren't pop enough, or they didn't have the right structure, whatever the fuck. But in being rejected, I think it saved us in that we went a different way. We were still wanted to make music, but we just made the music we wanted to make. We were lucky enough, for the most part, to have labels that wanted to release that music the way that we wanted to. I mean, we could go on and on about friends of ours that were ended up on major labels and made records, and not being the record label's priority, and then having records rejected, and then having to re-record them and do all this kind of shit, and then ending up releasing a record they didn't really like, but the record company wanted it that way, but then the record company did support them anyways, and then the people that they didn't ever feel comfortable with the records they released because the records got so kind of controlled by the big labels and shit. So in some ways, I think we're lucky that we were too weird, and that we just made the music that we wanted to make, and that we just kind of, our longevity is probably because we never ended up getting signed to a major label.
Hello everybody, I'm Jans from Tuber, and you're listening to Doom and Stone Latin America. Take care.
Estamos de regreso en este Doom and Stone especial de los Farflung celebrando 30 años de carrera. Vamos a cerrar esta entrevista, este es el último bloque. En el pasado, pues bueno, nos dieron algunos datos muy interesantes, sobre todo el cómo ver a una banda, cómo ven a su banda, cuál es su posición ante la fama, ante la distribución, ante las disqueras. Y bueno, primero que nada siempre dicen que esto es de amigos. Esta banda lleva 30 años, han sido compadres, amigos toda esta vida. Y pues han pasado por muchas cosas. No son una banda grande, reconocida que llena estadios, no son Weezer, obviamente. Sé que han tenido que dormir en el frío, en vans. Les ha dado luego la depresión pues en los tours de que no salen bien, la gente de repente no va y te preguntas ¿qué estoy haciendo? ¿Por qué sigo tocando? ¿Por qué estoy sufriendo aquí cuando podría estar en mi casa calientito? Esas cosas son las que te hacen dudar si continúas o no con tu legado con esta banda. Ellos lo han mantenido, han sobrepasado todas estas adversidades. Y bueno, Tommy dice algo muy chido, esto no es un partido de fútbol, de soccer, no hay ganadores, no existe el mejor, simplemente te la tienes que pasar bien, seguir tu arte y seguir tu corazón. Obviamente, pues Tommy dice que la fama no es algo que le importe, que le interese, que él hace música para él y si a la demás gente le gusta, pues bueno, él estará agradecido de lo que hacen, lo hacen desde el alma. Y pues bueno, también menciona, ¿no?, una anécdota bastante chida, Michael, sobre cuando ellos tocaban en Los Ángeles. Había gente que los iba a ver. De repente un día salieron como en una revista algo y un día apareció Rick Rubin en el show de Farflung y pues sacaron de onda, así Rick Rubin iba a verlos de la nada, pero pues nunca pudieron firmar con una disquera grande, nunca tuvieron como esas oportunidades, fueron muy weirdos o muy raros, muy weirds para las disqueras, incluso para MTV. Imagínense, a MTV no le interesaba trabajar con Farflung. De ese nivel de rareza es esta banda, siempre fueron los rechazados, los raros, obviamente pues no eran una banda que vendiera millones de discos como Wizard, así que pues bueno, dice que esto los ayudó, lejos de agüitarlos, el que sean raros y el que sean rechazados los hizo mucho más fuertes y pues siempre han buscado tener el control de su arte, han trabajado con muchos sellos, pero siempre se quejan de que los sellos pues obviamente no son lo mejor, a veces no les importan las bandas, solo el dinero, y pues ellos han batallado mucho con diferentes sellos con los que han estado, a los que no les importa realmente quiénes son ni lo que están haciendo. Y pues sobre esto lo vamos a ligar con la última pregunta que viene, el último bloque. Justamente hablan de Dave Schmidt, mejor conocido como Zula Basana, Electric Moon, Son 6, Intercosmos, obviamente Zula Basana de solito. Y él tiene un sello que se llama Zulatron Records. Les invito a que escuchen el podcast que hicimos especial con Dave. Lo entrevistamos, increíble entrevista. Está disponible en Spotify, en Spreaker o por supuesto también en YouTube. Doom and Stone es lo que le deben de poner en nuestro sitio web, doomandstonlatino.com, y todas nuestras redes sociales, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Pero bueno, regresemos a Dave Schmidt. Dave es una persona increíble, lo aman. Tommy dice que lo conoció en una gira que tenía. En ese tiempo ya no estaban tocando psicodelia, space rock, crowd rock, estaban tocando una cosa rara. Y ahí fue cuando conocieron a Dave. Dave quería ver a esa banda, estaba esperanzado de ver esos brotes, esos tintes psicodélicos, y pues no estaban tocando nada de eso, pero se hicieron muy buenos amigos. También conocieron a gente de The Orange Factory, a Walter de Radborn durante esas visitas, y se creó una red de camaradería, de buenos amigos. Y pues bueno, al final, después de muchos años, por fin lanzaron este último disco con Dave, con Zulatron Records. Así que pues bueno, para nosotros es un honor poder hacer la cobertura de este disco. Y pues bueno, también hablan sobre Zula Basana, que siempre tiene algo que ofrecer, es un gran anfitrión, un gran ser humano. Él les importa mucho la música, el arte. Él la verdad es que no pone las barreras creativas, siempre deja que las bandas puedan hacer lo que quieran, y de eso se trata Zulatron Records, y de eso se trata su último disco de Farflung, que lo pueden encontrar en Bandcamp. Póngale así Like Drones in Honey en Bandcamp, o póngale Farflung, se escribe Farflung, así Farflung. Y pues bueno, ahí lo pueden encontrar, farflung.bandcamp.com, ahí van a poder encontrar todo toda la música de estas leyendas que llevan 30 años. Nos despedimos, nos vemos en una nueva edición. Estén muy al pendientes de nuestro Spotify, de nuestro Spreaker y también YouTube, nuestras redes sociales. Vienen nuevas entrevistas, vienen nuevos programas. Recuerden que tenemos Doom and Stone Latinoamérica, Electric Church enfocado al rock de los 70s y Acid Nightmare enfocado a la psicodelia. Nos vemos muy pronto donde quiera que esté, donde quiera que lo escuche esta transmisión. Muchas gracias, recibo un abrazo caluroso, buenos humos y por supuesto, ya se la sabe, gócela.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Romano.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nowadays, you can exist without a label, and in a way, I would be fine with that. But having said that, I love Dave. I love Sulatron, Sulabasana. Like, I'm super pleased to be on his label.
I think that when I first met Dave, it was like there was like this period where it was one of the first periods of experimentation where Michael took a hiatus. And we did this tour where we did this very strange record called When Science Fails, because we realized in Michael's absence that we had to do a record that was very, very different from the more heavy psych stuff we were doing. So it was like one of the first times that we went, like, you know, I mean, to me, that record, it definitely has a very strong krautrock rock vibe, but there's also a very ambient vibe to it. It's a little bit wire-ish in a lot of ways, but it's what we wanted to do as the band in Michael's absence. But so we, for some reason, we got offered like, because, you know, I was with this other project and I knew Dave and the Peach Stahl from the Earthlings, and we did this small tour in Europe where we met Walter before he was doing the Roadburn. We met you know, Benny at the Orange Factory, all these places that would later become these rocks for like cosmic and stoner and psych rock in Europe. But like they remembered, and like I remember going there and them saying, in the weird way, they were like sort of disappointed, going like, "Oh, you just came and made like droning noises for 20 minutes or something," or like kind of like just, you know, let the drummer go off us. You were like all making a racket or whatever. But you know, we didn't have a set list for that tour. It was a different thing because Michael was doing his own thing and he needed some time. But we ended up doing this tour, and that's when I met Dave from Sulatron for the first time, and he was at the show and he goes like, "Oh, how come you didn't play this song or whatever?" I came because I really love this 25,000 Feet album. And I remember meeting for the first time, I said, "I'm sorry we disappointed you, but you know, we just had to do this." And he totally understood. And the guy from the Sony Records was there too, and he wasn't that impressed. He was going to give smoking his pipe and going like, you know, I think it was kind of a bit grouchy or whatever, that they were waiting to hear some of the space rock. But that's just one of those periods in you know, Farflung's history. And then later on, as we started going, we just started seeing Dave more and more. I think the first time we played Roadburn, Sulabasana was playing in the same room we played the couple of days before or something. Dave, I might be wrong about that, but we you know, but anyway, he was disappointed with the show or what. But I saw it and I thought it was fucking amazing. And I was going like, "Oh, Dave's so critical of his own music and it's so fucking far out." Whatever. He's a very humble guy, and I like that about him. But at the same time, he's a real person, and we always liked our interaction with him. He always had something to offer every time we went to Europe. It was always so cordial and was always so supportive of the band, and said he really liked a lot of our music and stuff like that. So every time we've been to Europe, we've hooked up with him. And I'm just really glad we have a relationship with him. And now we're doing this record, and he released this first album. And finally, the way the original artwork was meant to look, the way it was meant to sound, and the way it was meant to be presented to people. And he's just been a blessing to us. And I hope that hopefully we can repay him. And with this new album, which I thought is kind of like, you know, I mean, it's definitely, is I would say, a psychedelic rock album, but it's like, it's a challenging record. And like, he was willing to take the risk to put this record out and put the artwork out the way I wanted, me and Michael wanted it to be, the way the whole band wanted this record to be. He put it out that way, and there was total trust in us with our direction of it and respect for us as a band. And likewise, you know, Farflung, throw that back at him tenfold, you know, because Space Rock Drones is like one of the best things I've heard musically in a long time. And like Dave, just, he has this talent that is unbounded, and he's so humble about it, you know. He's such a humble guy. I'm really, really glad to be involved with him. And I think he's got the same gripes about the world we live in and what's going on musically in the world and stuff like that. So I think, and this has always been a thing that's been very solid between us and Dave. I'm really glad that we're traveling together on that. Don't you, Paul? Don't you think that's?
It's just such a different time. In the old days, it was all about the label you were on. I mean, you had to be a good band, but then you had to position yourself. And it was just so difficult to progress without being in the right label. And I mean, I joined Farflung in 2008 or something. It seems like we've been on a handful of labels since then, but I'm the most happy about Dave. Like I love his music, and he's just such a great, humble, and he really, like Tommy says, he just really cares about the scene, which is commendable.
I'm
Este es Eric de Mantra Machine y escucháis a Doomed and Stoned Latinoamérica.